It's Saturday, so it's View from the Boundary time, of course, and our guest today is an award-winning broadcaster. He's been involved with the Radio 4 Consumer Affairs programme You and Yours since 1974. He's presented it regularly from the mid-90s onwards. He's also worked as a BBC Disability Affairs correspondent. He was the first totally blind person to produce reports for television news. He's also presented programmes like Pick of the Week and a series entitled Blind Man on the Rampage. I rather like the sound of that. It's a very warm welcome, of course, you'll have guessed by now, to Peter White. Peter, it's lovely to see you.
Lovely. You plucked me from the crowd. Well, I was sitting there quite happily.
Well, I know that you're a Test Match Special fan as well, so I hope you're happy to be up here and talk about your love of cricket, and I'm happy because I know that if I've got a fellow broadcaster for this next half hour or so, that you'll look after me. I can just sit here, I can just serve up the occasional little question and prod you in the right direction, because that's what we rambling broadcasters do.
Absolutely. There's nothing we like more than an interviewee who won't stop talking.
And I'm exactly right. No, it's great to have you. So where are you in that enormous stand with all those thousands of people over there that we keep talking about on the radio?
No, not quite. I think they're a little bit over to our left. We're in the lightning stand. I don't know why it's called the lightning stand. But no, I mean, I'm waiting for the first rendition of Sweet Caroline, which
you won't have long. You won't have long to wait for that. It feels from up here, we're a bit cut off, but we have our headphones on, of course, and you hear the sound. I mean, it does sound like a terrific atmosphere.
No, when Anderson knocked Elgar's off stump out of the ground, there was an absolute explosion. And I mean, you listen to it on the radio and it's great, but when you're right in the middle of it, this is why people say, why'd you bother to go to cricket? You know, and you go to cricket and you take the radio with you. What's the point? Why don't you stay at home and have the radio there? But there is nothing quite like it's like when my football team, Southampton, score a goal. I was determined to get them in, even on a cricket test. They're playing Manchester United as we speak.
They are.
Yeah.
We'll feed you the scores.
I need to know the score. Yeah. But I mean, there is nothing like that explosion of sound. As I say, I first experienced at football at the little dell, lovely little ground that Southampton had. And it is like a bomb going off. And if you're 7 and you can't see, that's part of the fascination.
Because you feel it. It's not a question of seeing it. You feel
it from your feet upwards.
Yes.
It's as if the world is exploding.
Yes.
And that would either terrify you and put you off for the rest of your life, or it would entrance you, which is what it did to me.
Yeah. Well, I was on when that wicket fell, and I must admit, even by my standards, I shouted quite loud, so I hope I didn't startle you, but it was so dramatic.
Yeah.
And the stump flying out of the
That's
ground,
right.
and that crowd noise. So I mean, do you listen at the same time then? You're there in the crowd, but you do have your radio on.
And actually, of course, the problem is that if you're listening on DAB, there's a delay. Oh. So it happens in the crowd before it happens on your radio. So I don't. I still listen to dear old Longwave Radio 4, so that there isn't a delay. So it happens at the same time.
Oh.
So, and that's really quite
cunning.
Well, you've got to do it, really. Because the trouble is, and you can imagine, if you're listening to a cricket match with somebody who is watching it on television and you start twitching because a wicket's gone off before it's actually, you actually see it on the television, which is what happens, because television sound is behind for all sorts of technical reasons. You're very annoying to people because you're giving away the fact that something is about to happen.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So when did you? Can you remember when you first started listening to Test Match Special? Then I mean, was it? Presumably, it was your love of that programme, was it, that got you into cricket? Because you wouldn't have seen cricket or played it. So
no. I was into cricket before Test Match Special, because I think I'll be corrected by you Test Match Special aficionados, but I think it started in 1957.
It did.
Full scale. I mean,
there were bits.
Before, you had to dive backwards and forwards between the light programme and the London Home Service, and you had to know exactly when it was going to be on. So to find out that we actually had ball-by-ball commentary. So I was about 9 or 10, and it was the England series against the West Indies. And the first thing really that absolutely captured my imagination on Test Match Special, I suppose, was that huge stand between Cowdrey and May, where May got 285 and Cowdrey got, I think, 154, something like that.
I'm sure you're right.
But yeah, but I was interested. I just got interested in hearing odd bits. The first thing I remember even goes back further was Frank Tyson in Australia.
Oh yes,
54, 55, and you had in those days, of course, the commentary from Australia was almost impossible to listen to because you could hear the waves rushing over the wires, I think.
Yes.
It's a completely sort of distorted sound.
But did that take you there, though? It's funny because people say to us now, I know you're in Australia, but it sounds as if you're broadcasting just down the road. And actually, those old 4-wire circuits and so on, and the way that the commentary came back in those days.
No, I loved it. And then they'd lose it, and they'd say, at the moment, sorry, we've lost it. We're going to have to try and divert it through Colombo in Sri Lanka. And you lie there, because of course in Australia you were tending to listen to it early in the morning, because they didn't do, again, in my early days, they didn't do ball by ball. They came on about 6:30, 7:15 in the morning, just towards the close of play. But you were lying there just waiting, thinking, when do they get this thing sorted out through Colombo? They're all waiting for.
Well, I have cranked a handle. We used to have, when I first started, somewhere, I think I was in Pakistan, and you arrive at your point and have a box of gadgetry and with a big handle. So you crank the handle, and someone
like an old gramophone.
Yes. Someone say hello. I say hello. This is the BBC in the cricket ground in Islamabad. Or it was hello. I need to be put through to London. Oh yes, sir. So you then hear hello. This is Islamabad calling Tehran. Hello, Tehran. After much cranking of this handle, hello, Tehran here. Yes, this is Islamabad. Can you patch us through to Berlin? Yes. So you go to Berlin. Hello, and they'll patch us through. Finally, you get through to the tower in London, and you get patched through to the BBC, and you actually hear it going on in your headphones while you're waiting.
Yeah.
You can imagine these people just plugging things in on this huge switchboard to put you through. These days, just dial a number up. In fact, they don't dial a number up anymore.
No.
It's on the internet. That's how it they do.
But you can imagine when you only were going to get about 45 minutes commentary at the end of play, and then they had to divert it through Colombo. It was kind of really annoying.
So I wonder what TMS did. What did it do for you then? I mean, it just brings everything alive.
Well, I mean, it's still the ball by ball thing that was the best part about it. And I think I don't know whether Britain was the first country to have ball by ball commentary. I haven't got the faintest idea about that. But to be able to follow it all through the day at any time of the day and turn it on and get the score, so that was fantastic. You get the atmosphere, but all the things that people say about Test Match Special are true, that it's kind of unique in a way because it's far more than just commentary, and you've gone on reinventing yourselves. Now, who would have thought that Philip Tufnell would become the kind of idol of the nation?
Well, if you really want me to be honest, I'll say I didn't.
No. Well, I mean, no one knew his versatility.
No.
Actually, you reminded me of something about Phil, which was that I first met you, and you probably don't remember this, but I went to Barbados in '94 and managed to worm my way into the Test Match
Special.
I do
remember you at the back of our box.
I was in the back of your box, not doing any interviews, just sitting quietly, because I think I might have asked if we could go. And we were with a friend, a local Barbados fan. He wanted to come up as well because they all, listened to our commentaries. And I sat there for about an hour. And
it was basically sort of a wooden hen house on top of a chicken shed on top of the roof.
It did feel a little unstable.
It was rustic. I do remember you being there.
But what I do remember is going down afterwards, and they said, "Okay, you've been here long enough. I'll have to get rid of you now." I went down. I was walking back to our seats, and Lara was batting. It was the last day of the fourth test, and Lara was batting. They had to get, I don't know, about 240 odd, I think, and they were struggling. We got early wickets, but we all thought if Lara gets going, that's the end of the matter. And he suddenly skied the ball, and it was in the air. And I was walking again with Test Match Special in my ear.
I remember this.
And
I know whose name you're going to say.
They said, Tufnell is under the ball.
Yes, it was awful, wasn't it?
Oh, no.
It was a sinking feeling.
And there was about, I don't know, it felt like about 10 seconds. It can't possibly have been 10, but it felt that. And then, I don't know if you were commentating, actually, you might have been, I'm not sure. And then the sort of sound of amazement. Tufnell's caught it!
I think I was on at the time.
You were on the air.
It was one of those roller coaster emotions. Lara's going to be out. Oh no, it's Tufnell.
Yeah,
oh no, well, we might as well forget it.
That was the implication, whether you said it or not. No, I know. But I mean, that swung the game.
Actually, it was a good catch, and they did win the game. Alex Stewart scored 200 in that match, didn't he?
They did, yeah.
First time we won in Barbados for years. So how did you enjoy that? I mean, a trip to Barbados to watch cricket is like every cricket lover's dream.
I've been planning that, I think, for about 2 years to actually get there and get the time off. And I went with some friends. And it was great, not only because of the cricket, which was great, but going into sort of the gin shops at night and talking about the locals about it. And I'd bet some chap that I'd met in the kind of equivalent of a Barbadian pub the night before that we would get them out for 240 odd, and we did. So I went and claimed my glass of rum.
Well, it sounds as if you savoured it.
We embraced it. Yeah.
Tell me, Peter, how do you see the game of cricket? How do you visualise the game of cricket, given that you've never seen a game of cricket in your life?
It's funny you should say that, because it's quite a complicated thing. I mean, as you know, blind people play cricket. You advertise it regularly yourselves.
Yes.
With the with the primary club.
Yep.
But of course, what I gradually came to realise is that our idea, I mean, when I played cricket, it was with a bat and a football with sort of, things inside it to make it rattle.
Yeah.
The first ones had bells, and then they had sort of lead shot in there. But I gradually realised that, of course, the things that you were describing, the commentators were describing, like a hook and a cut, and was nothing like I actually thought it was. I mean, for a start, you didn't play hooks, and you just swung the bat and hoped to hell you would hit something.
Yes.
When, as a blind person, mind you, there are some sighted cricketers who play like that as well. Yes, I realised that I didn't know what I was talking about, really, when I was, if you said that, oh God, that sounded like a really good cover drive by Peter May, I didn't know what a cover drive was. I actually did a programme on Radio 4 with David Gower.
Wow.
And because David used to, I was in Hampshire and he was in Hampshire for quite a long time, and he used to pop up on our local radio station quite a lot. So I contacted him and said, would you do a programme with me explaining what these shots are to a blind person? And I had no idea that people had that. I'm waving my arm round I had no idea when people played their bat was that high and it sort of came round. I didn't know that until David explained it to me and illustrated it. And we tried to do this on the radio. And then I ended up at the end of it bowling one of those footballs with lead shot to David. And of course we had to fix it, so I got him out,
Of course.
So I mean, I'm not sure now that my concept of cricket is all about the sounds it makes. So it is about the sound of the bat on the ball.
Right.
It is the sound of an edge.
You can tell that when you're listening, or you're at a match, and if there isn't any radio on, if you're sitting at a Hampshire game, for instance, no radio, you can have a sense of what's going on.
I did this with, you'll know Kevin James.
Yes, of course.
You know Kevin, who now does the Hampshire matches.
Yes.
Was played for Hampshire for quite a while. And we did an experiment. I went up in the commentary box and said, I don't know who suggested this, whether it was me stupid enough to or Kevin brave enough to. So try commentating on an over with a blind person. And of course you do it. It's not foolproof at all. I mean, it's not miraculous stuff. But I mean, you can. There is all sorts of things which kind of give it away, like a sort of glide behind the wicket sounds completely different to a cover drive or something like that. It's difficult to, I'm not sure you could tell the difference between a hook and a cut. So I didn't try to do that. But and you also get a very clear idea from the crowd reaction of how many runs, whether it is going to go to the boundary or whether it's going to be a 2 or a 3. So I didn't do bad. I got about 4 out of 6 balls
really
in the over, reasonably accurate.
Having not been able to see them.
Couldn't see a thing. No, not being able to see them.
It is
just listening to it.
Yeah. Because we have a lot of blind listeners.
Yeah, we'll have blind people are mad about sport.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I remember Brian Johnston. Probably one of the only pieces of advice he ever gave, because he wasn't like that. But he said, think of the blind listener. And I remember fairly early on, a blind listener. I met him. I think it was at the Oval. And he says one thing. He said, we like it, getting things fairly well right. Can I just say something? He said, in my mind, he said, there's no such thing as a straight drive. I said, oh, okay. He said, because a straight drive will hit the stumps at the bowler's end. I need to know more than what you're saying. You can't just say someone's been straight driven for 4.
Yeah.
Which side of the stumps did it go?
That was what I was just going to say.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought, you're so right. So it's detail like that actually, because most of our listeners in a way are blind listeners because they're not here.
That's right.
So they don't see it.
Yeah.
When they're sitting in their car driving up the M1, they still have the same description of the game in their minds that you're getting. So actually, I think that a blind listener is our best coach, actually.
Yeah, but I suppose, to be fair to you, a straight drive, in a way, the suggestion is the straightness with which the bat is held, and so a few inches to the left or to the right, it doesn't stop it being a straight drive. It's still a straight drive, isn't it? Really, yeah.
And are you visualising in your mind that sort of description, though? I mean,
I don't think some blind people might. I mean, there are no rules really. Blind people are like everyone else. They're all individuals. I think I am much more into the flow of the game, the scores. I like my statistics.
Oh, right. Okay.
Not quite to the extent that Andy does.
He's obsessed by them.
But it's a great obsession. It's a wonderful, and you've had some wonderful people. I mean, Andy now and Andrew Sampson, and Bill Frindle going.
Also, he started it without any internet.
Yeah. Yes.
He used to arrive with boxes of files and folders and books.
I know.
You'd ask him a question and he'd have to delve into those, and most of them he had to update all the time with his writing and so on, while watching and scoring a cricket match at the same time.
That's why he'd sometimes ignore you completely.
Well, often.
Yeah,
often.
Yeah.
Did you get the sense of it being a bit of a community as well, Test Match Special, that actually, it is a kind of a team?
Yeah.
But
also, I think on the listeners are part of the community. That's the
Definitely.
thing. I think that's the sense you always get out of it. I think it is. And, somebody moves on and you think, oh, it'll never be the same again. It's like somebody like John Arlott. I mean, I grew up listening to John and idolising John Arlott, partly because another Hampshire man who lived about 6 miles up the road, also because he was very nice to me. I was there was a pub that my parents used to go to, and the landlord and landlady knew that I was obsessed by cricket. And John Arlott would pop in there for a bottle or 2 of wine. And they rang me up one day and said, we've asked Mr. Arlott if you could come down. We've told him about you. I was about 12 or 13. And he very kindly, because he was known as could be a bit grumpy.
Yes.
But he apparently agreed, and I went down there and he talked to me for about 2 hours, non-stop, about cricket.
Isn't that lovely?
A wonderful moment, really.
Yeah.
So,
he was a great describer, wasn't he? But not that he somehow built characters up. He described bowlers and batsmen, of course, in a way that was unique.
Yeah.
really, I think, Groucho Marx chasing a pretty waitress and all those sort of things instead about a fast bowler. I mean,
Yes.
those sorts of things, again, must really be very evocative in your mind.
Well, it was wonderful use of language as
Yes.
well with Arlott. I mean, because of course he was a poet, you know, a second-rank poet maybe, but a published poet. He had been the BBC poetry correspondent. I think he'd done those programmes. He's a very rounded man, wasn't he?
Yes.
And, you know, he'd been a police officer. He'd done all sorts of things, really.
Do you like one-day cricket as well? I mean, you're obviously a test match man at heart.
Yeah, I've learnt. I haven't quite learnt to love the 100 yet. Am I allowed to
There's
say
still
that?
time. You've
There's
got
still
until
time.
2027.
I think that those one-day competitions have evolved, and even the problem, and this is a cliche, but as with a lot of cliches, it's true, which is that every test match is different from another test match. You never get a repeat, and in some senses all one-day games are the same, and people will say, people aficionados will deny that, but it's true basically that
They can be formulaic.
they can be very formulaic, and because they're one innings, that's the subtlety of because it's a 2 innings game, and you can see things happen like the Headingley Test of 1981, where
yes.
you know, it's a classic example of it, isn't it? And we had a classic example of with the first Test, with England's reaction, or Stokes's reaction, to facing 553, which was not to sort of take any notice really, and just go crashing on and completely turn the game round. So a one-day game is a comedy sketch. A test match is a novel, I would say.
That sounds a very fair point. I'm talking to Peter White. It's lunchtime. At 88 for 3 is the score, and so South Africa are 176 behind. They'll be underway again in 10, 12 minutes or so, and the crowd are enjoying themselves, and I'm enjoying this chat too. How did you get into broadcasting, Peter? Because I mean, there can't be many blind broadcasters back in the day.
I was at university. I wasn't enjoying myself very much. I'd started to do law and realised there was no way I was going to be a lawyer. I think I could have done it, but it felt very formulaic. And I finally got round to thinking, what do I really want to do in life? It's no good just doing the jobs that are offered. And I thought, what I really want to... I mean, I'd been listening to radio. Well, you know that from talking about Test Match Special, but I listen to everything, you know, news, music, everything, since I was about 5 or 6. And it suddenly dawned on me, I want to do local, not local radio, I want to do radio. But I didn't know many blind people who were doing it. It wasn't on the kind of list of things that we were supposed to do.
No.
And it was the beginning of local radio that did it. These stations were being announced, and I think there must be opportunities. Because you worked for local radio, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you
And
did.
you're absolutely right. I mean, it sounds familiar, this.
Yeah, I thought there must be opportunities. I was sort of, you know, really in the depths, really, not knowing what I wanted to do. And I hitchhiked. I was at the University of Kent.
Right.
I hitchhiked down to
What?
Southampton.
By yourself?
Well, I used to hitchhike a lot.
By yourself?
Yeah, by myself.
Good grief.
Yeah.
That's fairly trusting, isn't it?
Drivers were very nice on the whole. I got a few dodgy ones, but, you know.
We better not hear about
No,
that.
you're probably better not.
You'd stand on the side of the road, a blind fellow with a stick, and you'd be hitchhiking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd started that at school at Blind Sky. I terrified my
Wow.
mother once
Well, I'm
by
not
turning
surprised.
up in the middle of a term because I'd hitchhiked home. She was up a step ladder in the larder, and she fell off it. I walked in the door, but on this occasion.
But how did you get to the road? How did you start? I mean, what was the process? How did you start hitchhiking?
Well, you know, I mean, you did your research, Jonathan. You know about doing your research. You knew where the main road was that you had to get to.
Good grief.
And you could walk to that point.
Right.
Sometimes as I got older, I'd get someone to give me a lift to a decent starting point.
Yes.
You know, on a sort of just off a roundabout or something like that. But the rest of it, yeah, you just did it the way everyone...
Wow.
And the white stick was a very useful way of getting lifts. To the point where sighted people started to borrow them off me.
Get off.
No, they did. No. I also had a friend who used to use my white stick to travel on the buses free. It's a terrible world. It's a terrible world. But I went down to Southampton to hitchhike to answer the question you asked me, and went in and got sort of more or less sent on my way. Have you written to the BBC? I've done all that. I've just had rejection letters and sorry, there are no jobs available, as if an organisation of 20-odd thousand people had no jobs available. It was obviously rubbish. But a man called Ken Warburton, and I am eternally grateful. Do you know him?
Well, I certainly know of him. I think my wife's had more.
Well, he saw my white stick trailing rather disconsolately into the lift at BBC Radio Solent, and I was back in Winchester. I was just getting ready to hitchhike back, and the phone rang, and it was Ken. And he said, it was clear, I've got this job doing a programme for blind people on BBC Radio Solent. I saw you leaving. And I said, the last thing I want to do is a programme for blind people. I want to do a programme for everybody. I don't want to do special programmes. But anyway, Ken said, come down and see me. So I didn't hitchhike back. I went back down to Southampton the next day. My dad gave me a lift that time.
That's nice.
Didn't hitchhike the second time. And to cut a very long story short, after about 10 minutes talking to Ken, he said, well, here's a Ewer tape recorder. Remember?
Oh, yes.
Old Ewer.
Weighed a ton.
Oh, they did weigh a lot. It's amazing. I've still got any back muscle. He said, he showed me how to use it. He said, go and do a recording for me, and we'll see where it goes from here. And I went to interview a blind girl who was horse riding, and I always remember her. I said to her, well, what are the risks for a blind person horse riding? She said, well, you've got to be wary of low-flying aircraft. And I thought, nobody's taking this seriously. But I brought this back to him, and he said, oh, that's quite funny, and really, this wasn't quite how I'd imagined my programme for blind people to be.
No.
But and he said, would you like to present it? So, and that was the start, really.
That's the start.
Yeah.
But meeting people and talking to people, and that, I mean, that's clearly what you're very good at. You're a great communicator, aren't you? That's what.
Well, I've always enjoyed meeting people, and having used radio so much, because obviously for blind people it's kind of everything, really. It's a newspaper, it's your music in the same way as it is for everybody else, but it perhaps it's changing a bit now with technology and so forth, but at the time it was a window onto everything, really. So I'd picked up, I suppose, the way the good broadcasters did it. And I had an idea what I liked and what I didn't like about broadcasting. People who described straight drives and didn't tell you exactly where the ball was going. That's
terrible crime.
Terrible crime. So, and it just, one thing led to another, basically. So Solent gave me the opportunity to begin to do stuff for the news programme, and then I thought, I'm actually getting there now.
But writing about scripts and things. I mean, we're not very scripted up here, if I'm honest. But there are a lot of the sort of programmes. A lot of the things that you would have been doing, presumably, would have required some scripts.
Yeah, I'm a very good brailleist. I was very lucky to be a good brailleist. So I would write all my own scripts. So half the time the staff didn't know what I was going to do, which rather unnerved them for a little while. But that's how I did that. Of course, computers have changed all that and have made it possible for us to write scripts. And of course, you've now got speech, which enables you to and you can get newspapers and books in a way that I couldn't at the time. So in those early days, it was a bit hit and miss, but I managed to and a bit of ad-libbing when I was in trouble,
yes,
which of course you need to be able to do anyway. And it gradually grew, and it's much more sophisticated now. And in some ways, it's more practical, and in some ways, it's more difficult, because computers, to be honest, present as many challenges as they solve.
Yes, of course.
So in the end, it's still about talking to people in an accessible way and welcoming them in and enjoying what you're doing and trying to convey that enjoyment to other people.
So you and yours then, how did that come about? I mean, you've been involved with that programme for about 50 years.
Well, when I started to work at local radio, I thought this is all right, but they haven't got any money. It was very clear that they didn't have any money. You had the same problem, I think. Yeah,
I had to work for nothing for my
first. There's not a future in this. No. And a chap called Dennis Skillicorn, who is a lovely man. It's a Manx name, and Dennis wasn't, I think, with the best will in the world, he wasn't a very good broadcaster, but he was a very good salesman. And Dennis was a freelancer, and he said, you've got to freelance, Peter, you've got to sell your stuff. It's no good just giving it to local radio, you've got to go out to all the other stations, and you've got to find other programmes to work for. And so I looked around thinking, who are the programmes that are using other people's material? And one of them was you and yours, and they seemed to have quite a, they had a programme every day and quite a fast turnover. So I just approached them. And the other thing that helped me a lot was In Touch, which is the programme that I've done for blind people for nearly 50 years now. High time they got rid of me, I suspect. but working for that brought me to the attention of other Radio 4 producers, including you and yours.
Right.
So initially I went to them and said, I think the first piece I did with them was something to do with mushroom farming. I didn't know, and that was when I realised that you could broadcast a thing about things you knew absolutely nothing about.
Absolutely.
As long as you did your research, enough of it. So that's really how you and yours started in the very early days, just freelance pieces, and that grew to longer pieces. And also, to be fair, the other thing that happened was that disability became a far more a subject that people stopped ignoring.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was there, when I started, it was never mentioned, and if it was in a kind of entirely kind of sort of sympathetic, oh, isn't it sad kind of way. But things changed. Legislation started to come in. People began to think about opportunity for people, and suddenly it crept up on us that disability was something that people wanted material about, to put it bluntly.
Yes.
And so I was I've had an awful lot of luck in my career, and it seemed to be in the right place at the right time.
Do you think people are getting more educated to disability and better to cope with it? I mean, you talked about some people being uncomfortable about having a blind person presenting a program. I mean, you can imagine perhaps in those days the studios having to especially, watch out, Peter, I've got Peter coming in, right, better make sure that's there and so on. Do you think people are, more relaxed with disability now and much better at just dealing with it?
This is a hard question to answer because there's definitely more thought given to it, and people, but when it really comes down to it, I did a programme on In Touch only the other day about some of the daft questions that people ask us, and these are questions that kind of seem, their whole attitude to us is dominated by this one thing, the fact that we can't see. And I can understand why this is fascinating to people, but the fact is we're multi-dimensional people like everybody else, and that's only one thing. So if you meet somebody, for example, and the first thing they say to you is, where's your dog? Where's your dog?
Where is your dog?
My dog, which is a pet Labrador, is lying asleep at home. Clearly what the implication is, that you've got a guide dog. Probably there are about 5,000 working guide dog partnerships in the UK. There are about 350,000 registered blind people.
But I guess you're right. It is a fascination. I don't know. I cannot imagine living my life without being able to see anything, and that is why I suspect you.
No, I understand that.
Sighted people cannot imagine it.
I know, but if you had to answer those questions, well, you probably have to answer questions about what it's like to do Test Match Special every day. But if you have to answer those questions every day,
yes.
I got off a train once, and this guy was walking along. He was helping me. I was at Oxford Circus. I was going towards. I knew the way, but he was being helpful. And we're walking on, and he suddenly said, "Where's your dog, then, mate?"
Okay.
And I said, there was a pause, and I suddenly, before I knew what I was doing, I said, oh my God, I must have left it on the train. And that led to utter chaos. I mean, it ended in the suspension of the Bakerloo line. While they tried to find this non-existent dog.
Oh, God.
And in the end, they said to me, somebody said to me, when they discovered, they said, why did you do that? And I thought, what can I say? Because I've always wanted one. Which wasn't true.
Peter, there's a very naughty side to your character, as we've discovered today, and it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you again. And Barbados seems a long time ago.
It does.
It's great to catch up, and just congratulations for what you've done. You've inspired so many people I know, and it's lovely to hear about your love of cricket and what this silly old programme does for you and many others. So thank you so much for coming in.
I'll go back to my day out.
Well, the great thing is you won't have to hitchhike back, I don't think, because your wife's here, isn't she?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think if I've said anything about her to upset her.
No, I think
I have actually managed to steer off that.
I think you're off the hook.
Jolly good.
Good luck.
Nice to see you.
Keep going.
Cheers, Jonathan.
Keep going.